Well, hello, Waterlife family and beyond, and welcome back for yet another episode of the Waterlife Debrief podcast. Hopefully you didn't run off after last week with these two behind the wheel, but we're back in it.
We're glad to have you back, Natalie.
It was a dumpster fire without you.
No, I thought it was great.
Definitely
I
not
thought
the
it was
same.
good. Lots of people tuned in, had some good feedback this Sunday morning. And
we got lots of thumbs down, unsubscribes, hate mail. They put it in the offering plate.
Oh,
and
true. Okay, I don't
we'll
know
talk
about
that. Well, anyway, there you go.
Anyways, well, I missed you guys, so
we missed you.
I'm so thankful to be back.
Hope you had some good time off.
Yeah, there's no
Refresh,
place like
refuel.
home. Yeah, there's no place like home, so I was excited to be back and get back into the swing of things. So
I think you went to, was it Passion City Church you went to?
I did.
In Atlanta?
Yes.
How was that?
Yes. Well, I'm mad because whenever you Google it, it told me that I was going to the main campus, but I, in fact, did not go to the main campus because they pull down the screen and it's just like you're watching Louis Giglio on TV. And I was like, man, this is a rip. I could have done this on YouTube. And so anyways, but just like we talked about today, there's nothing like being in the building with the body of believers and just being in community with each other. And so I get it. So I was glad to be in the building,
All right.
but I experienced it and I said, I'm ready to be back home with my Waterlife family. So
There you go.
Excited to hit the ground running and get back. And we're
Good.
heading toward a lot of good things right now around the church. So we'll kind of chat about that.
Yeah,
a
so,
little bit.
I mean, we've got women's conference.
All things women's conference.
Literally almost, 450 almost at this point? And
yeah.
we're still pushing people.
Yeah.
And the cutoff, when is the cutoff for the
Tuesday.
ladies? It's
Yep.
this Tuesday.
Tuesday at midnight.
So we're filming this on Sunday. So this Tuesday, what would that be, the 29th?
28th.
28th, sorry, 28th.
Yep.
You wait till the 29th, you're out of luck.
Yep.
So
12:01 on the 29th.
Like,
You're out of luck.
I'd like to encourage the ladies to invite somebody. I heard several ladies tell me today they invited a friend that was coming.
Mm-hmm.
One lady's, I think the friend just got saved and they were bringing her, so that was kind of cool.
Get fired up.
So yeah, make sure you're here for that. It's going to be a good time. And then we have Ronnie Simon's going to be here for our Israel seminar, and that's we'll be giving more information about that. But Ronnie's our guide in Israel. Ronnie, his parents immigrated to Israel after World War II, went through the Holocaust, escaped the concentration camps. They were from Romania, Jewish folks from Romania. Ronnie grew up there, served in the Israeli Defense Force, was an officer there in the military, retired out. But he's a historian. He does the tours, does a fantastic job. He has a wealth of knowledge on the Bible and all the history and archaeology and all of that over there. I mean, it really is. He's a great guy. But also, he's going to be talking about current events. And I got to go to Israel. I got invited with a group of pastors back in November, into November, right there, the 1st of December. And that was all about seeing what had happened October 7th with what Hamas did over there, and to see hear from the people that experienced all that terrible thing. And I'm just here to tell you, Israel is not the problem there. They're not the victim. And there's a lot of just absolute lies and stuff in the media about that. It's very concerning to see the rise of anti-Semitism, all this kind of stuff. So he's going to be here talking about 2 nights, how to understand that, what the history of that is.
That's in the evening, you said.
Yeah, 6 o'clock both nights. So Monday and Tuesday. At first I thought, we could do it Sunday. I was like, Mother's Day. I can't do that. Right? So we've got Ronnie coming Monday and Tuesday night, and then he's headed to Village Church, our friends there in South Carolina, for Wednesday and Thursday night. So we're excited to have Ronnie. Ronnie's really good. He's very thorough. It will be very eye-opening. So if you know people in the community, invite people and come on out both those nights. And he'll go in depth about all of that. But it'll give us a better awareness, and it'll give us the true story and not what they put in the media, which is the narrative they spin. So that's coming up. So make note of that. It's going to be good.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's going to be good.
It's exciting. How are discipleships going? Discipleship classes going right now?
Going well.
Just kicked off a new season.
We're 2 weeks in, and great turnouts, great people coming out, new people every week. In some way or other, as far as, and so I encourage you, if you're listening and you want to come in, it's not too late.
Just jump in.
Just jump
No,
in.
Yeah.
not too late at all.
Any night, Monday through Wednesday at 7 p.m. We even had some new ones at the Toxic Empathy. And so on Wednesday nights.
Some others ran out screaming.
I know, right? Get some new ones. Some
Yeah.
run out screaming. It
Well, you
balances
know.
out.
No, that was a fun. Last
Yeah.
week, for instance, we talked about first week, we defined what toxic empathy is, what it does, why it's a problem. Basically, defining that empathy becomes toxic when you do 3 things. When you do one of 3 things, or the combination of all. You affirm sin, you validate lies, or you support destructive policies. And so we looked last week at Jesus with the woman caught in the act of adultery and how he did not take the toxic empathy path. You got religious leaders had no empathy at all. You've got what toxic empathy might have looked like. We talked about that, and there would have just excused her sin and let her go on her way and go off on the wrong path. But Jesus loved her enough to walk into that and call her from that. So that's what we did. And then beginning this week, we're starting to look at individual areas that we have problems with in America on that topical. So yeah, come on out. And it's not, like I said, they kind of stand alone by themselves, and I'm fairly repetitious with this. So come on out and be fun.
And that's all the classes. So come on out any night. 7 o'clock.
Good opportunities, and it's always a good opportunity on Sunday morning to gather together. So this morning we gathered together, heard a fire message. I was sitting there the whole time thinking, fire, fire, fire. Yes, it was so good. And I heard a lot of good feedback even on the way out and stuff like that. And even it was clocking.
Clock it, whatever.
Clock it.
Yeah.
That's what Ava told me when I came back for the final song. She said, Todd, that was good.
I
don't even know what this means, but I'm going to take it.
Even my husband, when I got home, he said, that was a great message this morning. I said, I know. So this morning you were talking about how church really is a family. So why don't you give us a recap, just kind of an overview of what you talked about, and then we'll dive into some questions.
I mean, about a month ago before Easter, we talked about Peter at Caesarea Philippi, where we learned church is not a building. Make sure you understand it's not a building, not a location. It's the people of God, people who've trusted Jesus Christ, and so it's His possession. It's not mine, not Kevin's, not yours. I mean, we belong to a church, but it's Jesus leads it, and He's building the church. And we talked today about how when you look at that little, it's almost like in the book of Acts, they're starting the narrative historically of what happens after Jesus' resurrection. And then it's like they hit this little pause and just say, and here's what was going on in the church. Just kind of gives you this little overview about what they were about. And then it gets right back into the narrative, and we're going to see next week, they get in trouble for preaching Jesus. And Peter basically tells them, you can kill us, but we're going to keep doing it. Yeah. And so we're going to talk about that. But right there in the middle, here's this, group of people that were devoted to Jesus and devoted to one another. And they're doing life together. So we'll talk later. They're not socialists. I mean, they're just doing life together, and they're experiencing all this incredible, awesome stuff. And I think it's because, obviously God was at work in and through them, but they invested in the right things. And so I think when we do the same thing, it does as well. So it's fun to talk about. We looked at how they were devoted to basically 4 things. They were devoted to worship. They got together and they worshiped together. They were devoted to fellowship. We would call that community, doing life together. They actually, who knew, enjoyed being with one another. Right. They loved one another. They enjoyed service, and they enjoyed, and they were devoted to, oh, good grief! What's the last one? Prayer.
Yeah, sorry. You got it.
And prayer. So so it's neat. It's neat to see that definition of the church there. And if you'll keep that in mind, for those of you who like to study the Bible, and I hope that's everybody that's listening to us, if you'll keep that in mind as you read the book of Acts, you'll see that again and again and again. Particularly the prayer thing. You'll see them praying all the time. Even next week, when we looked at them getting in trouble and getting threatened that we're going to kill you if you don't stop talking about Jesus, first thing they do when they get back is Peter and them go back to the church and they pray. And they don't pray, God, get us out of this. They pray, God, give us the boldness to do it. And then the Bible says the place was shaken, and they spoke the word of God boldly. The prayers answered. So it's really cool. I mean, there's a lot of things like that, a lot of miracles happening and things in the book of Acts. So it's really kind of a cool thing, and get people to understand. I think people don't understand sometimes what they're missing when it comes to the church and what a blessing the church is designed to be. In the early church, these guys certainly understood that. And what people are looking at that sometimes, they're like, well, yeah, that was a little small church. It was easier for them to do that. It's not a small church at that point. It is 3,120 people at that point, because they go from 120 to 3,120 in a day. That's one of the places, by the way, in the Holy Land you go to. You go to the southern steps, and that's the original steps that went to the temple area. And that's where Peter preached. They believe he preached that Pentecost sermon. And all the little ritual baptism was something. The ritual washing was a big thing in Jewish culture. So there are all these pools that are still there. And so that's where they figured they must have baptized. Where else are you going to baptize 3,000 people?
Right.
They had more than we did, Kevin. They had more than two. They have more than 2 baptisms. They baptized them right there. So it's really cool. You see that there. And so this church is not small at that point, but they definitely love Jesus and love one another. That's a cool thing about how they did that. And so it's that kind of cool.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to break that down a little bit. We're going to talk about just good and bad church experiences and kind of what leads to those things, and talk about a growing church and talk about a church that has hindered growth. And then we're going to talk about kind of the connection between the history of the church and our country. And so we're just going to dive into a couple different things today. So we'll get right into it.
Whatever you got.
Yep. And so just this morning, I mean, you kind of hinted a little bit about how, you talked a little bit about church hurt and how people will use that term and kind of throw it around as a reason to not come to church. But you had just said, the church has blessed your family.
Sure.
Been a huge part of your life. And so I just wanted you to kind of talk a little bit to the people about, maybe just a brief overview of kind of your upbringing, because I know that, that's maybe not the case for a lot of people. So just talk about your upbringing, what a blessing the church has been to you. And then Kevin, I'll kind of come to you and we can just kind of ping pong. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up at First Baptist Columbia. That's where Becky went to church. And I distinctly remember somewhere along the line realizing, as the kid who was not the good kid in sports, was in remedial math, didn't make the gifted and talented program. I've told you all those stories. And someone that was kind of picked on kind of actively because I wasn't good at those things. I learned early on, I realized they treat me differently here. There's a different thing at church when I go to church. So I remember even as a young kid, kind of like, I like it here. It's I can't say I liked every sermon. I had the wiggles and everything. I got in trouble for that. But I understand there were good people in my path. The senior adults would stop and talk to you, and they would, they'd encourage you, and they taught us in Sunday school and things. And so there were these people that God put in my path then, and like so many of those, a lot of them are passed away and gone to be with the Lord now, but there's a lot of them that are still alive that if I see them or I hear from them, like, we pray for you, that sort of thing. They were there at my ordination. They were there at Becky and I's wedding, so there was that spirit of community growing up through that. You just had these adults that were, pouring into me, teaching me the same things my parents were trying to teach me. And that's something, Natalie, for you and Kevin, you guys are parents, and I know people that listen are parents. That's one of the things that you need to understand as a parent. You need those voices for your children. Like, you're going to tell them those things, teach them those things. You need other adults reinforcing the same thing.
Absolutely.
That's the power of the church if you're consistent through that. These adults, these good adults, will come alongside your child. They'll hold them accountable. They'll encourage them. They'll pray over them. They'll teach over them. They'll reinforce the same things that you're trying to pour into them from the Bible. And so that happened to me, and that was a big deal. And people have been very, they were very supportive. When I got called to ministry, it was kind of like, we knew that was going to happen. I'm like, well, I didn't. I've been running for a year. But they were that way. They always been supportive. It's like even Eric's dad. So Eric, my pastor friend, Eric's dad was our pastor for 36 years. And every time I see Dr. Estep, I felt called to ministry in about 1991, I guess it was. And a long time ago, back in the 1900s. And Dr. Estep, to this day, if I see him, will say, I pray for you every day, Todd. I pray for you every day. And I appreciate that,
awesome.
And I got little old ladies that do that.
If you know him, he really does.
Yeah, he
really
does
means
that. He does that. He makes fun of me too, which I like. But he picks at me a little bit, but he means that. And so I've had this litany of people that I can think of all throughout my church life that have somehow invested in me, poured into me, did something, held me accountable when I need to be held accountable, encouraged me when I did. They pray for me, this, that, and the other. And I've had them do the same thing with our children, and that's been a real blessing to us. And all the churches we've been in, people have, just been a blessing to our boys and loved on them too. And they do the same thing that church did for me. They prayed for them, all that kind of stuff. So I love the church. I obviously everybody can have a rough go around with the church somehow or with some person in church. I mean, Kevin, you and I are no shortage. We've been there, done that.
Correct.
But even through that bad church experience, God used that for good. I learned more through the bad church experience I had about what to do as a leader and what not to do. And even though, you had a bad experience in some ways, we had a bad experience in some ways, there were still good people there too. Yeah. So the church overall, man, has been a blessing. That's why I get irritated when people just bash on the church for no reason. I'm like, you know what you're talking about.
Right.
So the church has in so many ways been a blessing to me. And it's just that I like that thing of doing life with people. I've always enjoyed, it's fun. We're doing Wednesday night stuff now, and I really enjoy that. And when I started in ministry, I sat in that throne thing I was talking about today, with the traditional church. But I spoke on Sunday morning, I spoke on Sunday night, and then we had Wednesday nights. And I always particularly liked Sunday night and Wednesday night because kind of the core would come out. It's kind of like when we do our Wednesday events. A lot of times, kind of the core comes out, and people really want to be there. And it's just that I love catching up with people before on Wednesday night or after a Wednesday night Bible study. It's way less busy, it's really informal. Same thing. Always loved that. And here at this church, it's just been a history of really great things. I know, you guys weren't there in the early days, but when we were, packing stuff up in a trailer, setting up, tearing down stuff. Those were fun days in a lot of ways because we were just doing stuff. We were working together as a team, having a good time doing it. And I am so thankful for all those folks that helped us move boxes and set up things and served at High Brighton High School and the Civic Center and do so today. We even had, our church staff was working together, setting the building back up after the pregnancy center banquet the other night that we had here. And I just love that. I mean, I like doing life with people that way. Of course, I've got plenty of friends that don't know Jesus. I want them to know Jesus, but there's just something about the church. It is a very fun place for me to be, safe. I just love the people. And so it's been a blessing.
Awesome.
It's been a blessing.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing. Kevin, how about you?
Well, a lot of that, I'll try not to echo everything, but I mean, I can
Echo away.
Some similarities there. And of course, growing up, I didn't have one church because of we moved around a little bit, but it was all that sense of family. It's that sense of community that spoke into me, spoke into my life, even though I was a little rascal.
Not you.
He's a bigger rascal.
No way. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Was a little one.
Very
now
tall
a big
rascal.
one, yeah.
Haven't changed much, but it just helped me through some health issues, some deep times. I think about even when I was a teenager, my youth leader spoken to it, but then also just time and time again, people of the church really cared. The community mattered. Always lent a hand, and then of course you get in ministry, and of course with family and all that kind of stuff. You see, we've gone through a couple different, a tragedy and then adversity, and it's been the church that has really stepped up and helped us through that encouragement, adversity, and then always doing whatever I can. And of course, you hear often, which this is the greatest thing I love to hear, is, "Hey, I'm praying for you, Pastor Kevin." Right, absolutely. Or when I was younger, in younger ministry, they called me PB. That was young and hip that day. But I mean, again, the church, and then of course, just like you said, we've had some church hurt, and there was good people there, and that just helped us through and spoke into our lives of that, and that was just. And I agree with you as far as people criticize the church, and all churches aren't the same. There's people within the church that are not exactly versed, as we'll probably talk about here in a bit. But again, the church is a community, a family that really makes a difference.
Yeah, and I echo what you say too. I remember, when my mother was dying with cancer and dealing with all that, and I was going back and forth, and we were, in the middle of all set up, tear down church and everything here. It was about, that's really 12 years ago, this past week. And, the church people were there. They were there during that whole time and praying and encouraging. So it's man, what a blessing. That's the thing. You always encourage people, like, if you don't, as I said today, if you don't find your place in community and you don't you're not going to have it when you need it. And it's not the church's fault. It's because you're like that lady I talked about that would come in late to the church, run out early, and would not, take a step.
Right.
You gotta. We can give all kinds of avenues to get you connected, but you still got to do your part. But if you do that system will be there for you. Those relationships, all that stuff will be there. That is an incredibly encouragement and incredible help. It's funny. We have, in every one of the churches that we've been in, we still have friends that all of them that we served in Forest City, we served in Gaffney, we served up here. And my 98-year-old administrative assistant, Miss Shirley, we love her to death. She's like family to us. And her husband was on chairman of deacons and part of the search committee that brought us to Gaffney. And man, you think I don't know what I'm doing now. I really didn't know what I was doing then, but just a wonderful group of people. But she and I have been like just the dearest friends, even though we had this huge age gap. She had worked for the church
Those are the best friends.
For years.
Yeah.
I mean, for years. But Miss Shirley is fun. And Becky and I were going to see my son Jake and his wife and grandbaby were moving to Greenville, South Carolina. And we had helped them move that day. And we came back and I said, Becky, let's swing by and see Miss Shirley. So we called Miss Shirley. We try to do that when we can. And she's still vibrant, lives by herself, doing great, but love catching up with her and sitting down. We just enjoy her so much. And she does the same thing that my pastor does. Todd, I love you. She says, I love you and I pray for every day. And it's like another grandmother to me. And I've had in my whole life in ministry, I've had those extra sets of mamas and grandmamas and granddaddies and
it makes a difference.
Those guys that were always there. And I grew up in a church where guys were manly and there was a good example of what a godly man looked like, and they certainly weren't effeminate males by any way, shape, or form. I don't know how we got in that mess in America the last few years, but
That's a whole different podcast.
That's a whole different. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
But yeah, the church has been an incredible blessing on my life, and I want that for everybody. And it always bothers me. One thing that bothers me in ministry is, and I know people are wired differently, and listen, I'm pretty introverted by nature anyway. I can be by myself and be in the woods and do all that and be fine. So I know some people struggle with that and trying to get connected and kind of feel awkward and all that. But man, I hate for people to just kind of be on the fringe. And I'm like, you don't know what you're missing. You got to take a step. You got to take a step. If you'll just take a step into a smaller forum, you'll get connected. You'll get to learn some people. And you'll find there's some great people here that, walk with you, and you'll follow Jesus together. So I'd love to see people do that.
Yeah. So just really quickly, like growing up, it was just me and my sister, and we were raised by our mom. She was a single mom and raising us, and she'll always tell everybody the story. It was my great grandma's like dying wish. She said, Amy, just keep those girls in church. So my mom said, okay. And so over the last little bit, like I've kind of realized, I'm like, my mom kept her promise by keeping me and Macy in church and coming to church and making that a part of your rhythm and routine, because you also talked about consistency this morning. So I want families to know that is so important, but it's even more important, like you're talking about right now, to get connected and to get plugged in. Because there's one thing about coming to the church house, being in the church house and being there, but then whenever you walk out the doors, you kind of check out.
Correct.
And you don't do anything else with it, and you don't grow, and you're not challenged to take steps and things like that. And so thank God growing up, my mom kept us in church as much as she could, and she did the best she could with what she had and things like that. But for me, it really wasn't until I moved away my sophomore year. It was like my mom will tell you, it was the worst time of her life. I was like 14. I was like, I'm going to move with my dad. And so I'm moving with my dad, and then my dad's like, we're moving to Indiana. So I was like, pop off. So we go to Indiana. That's where my dad's side of the family is. So I moved there. I was a sophomore. I didn't know anybody except for my cousin Haley. And I remember then she was plugged in to this it was called Memphis Christian Church. And I remember they did like contemporary Christian music, and they had a youth program. It wasn't huge, but it was a few kids. So there at youth, I got to know a few kids before we started school that August. So it was really cool. And I still have in my little tote, one of my little totes at home, I still have a little postcard where the youth pastor wrote me before I was even established, like moving there. And it was like, hey, we were so glad to have you at Collide. We hope to have you back, blah, blah, blah. So I still have that because that meant a lot to me. And so then, I just started, that was whenever I really started to like think more about God and like wonder about God and different things. Cause before that I had just kind of grown up in it, and it was just part of who I was. It wasn't like how I was raised. It wasn't actually who I was. I didn't embody my beliefs and things like that. And so then like my aunt, she had been Catholic her entire life, but then she kind of started to wonder more things about that and ask different questions. So we started going to a bigger non-denominational church together. And I went there through and got plugged in with a youth program there. It was fantastic. Still remember my youth leader to this day. And, but anyway, so then I graduate, and then I decide that I want to move back home. And so then I go back to my home church. In the meantime, I meet my husband and different things like that. And we were married for a short period of time, started having some problems. And one thing that we realized really quick was like, we're not putting God at the center of our life or at the center of our marriage and different things like that. So we were like, there's got to be something different. And again, I had been to a non-denominational church, so I knew what that was like. And so I thought, my husband would probably enjoy it too. So then we started kind of looking, but we didn't really look. I was like, and I walked into my old job actually at Nationwide, and I was telling my friend Christy there, I was like, yeah, Chris and I are kind of looking for a different church, and Brooke Robbins was working there. She actually had my old job, and she was like, you should come check out my church. And I was like, I don't know, I just haven't looked into it. So anyways, I started coming here. We never looked anywhere else. We never went anywhere else.
Let's go.
So I know.
Pop
so
off.
immediately we get plugged in. That was February, and then all of a sudden COVID hits, but we stuck with it through the summer and got plugged in serving and different things like that. And
got hired.
A year later, got
truly.
called to ministry, got hired, and I've been here ever since. But anyways, I say all that to say, because I know that not everybody had the classic upbringing of, what is it? Is it called the nuclear family? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
So not everybody has that upbringing. And so sometimes you really don't find Jesus, or you don't get plugged in and start understanding it until you're later in life. life. And so I just want to encourage everybody that it's never too late to get plugged in and to take next steps. And, we've got all kinds of opportunities for all generations, all people, all backgrounds. We've got opportunities for you here. So just wanted to put that little plug in there. So,
well, and that's the thing you already mentioned, and you both mentioned, is plugging in and connecting, not just going, but belonging makes a difference. And so, I mean, we've got people, and I know people that are going through issues, and parents and all that kind of stuff. Plug in and be part of the family.
Yeah, and also be an example. Like, if you need to teach your children to love the church.
Yep.
Like, it thrills me when the grandkids are here and they're just like loving it. They're running around, hugging on Miss So-and-so, that's their teacher or whatever, having fun. Like, I want them to love the church.
Yes.
I want them to love the church. And we need, if we're coming in with some kind of down in the mouth attitude or like, we got to go today. I mean, like, we're going to teach our kids to hate the church. No, teach them to love the church. I mean, just be a blessing to them as well.
And you've always said, if you're just flippant about it, because again, you talked about consistency this morning. If you're just flippant about it,
you're teaching
they'll learn very quickly what takes priority. And it's like church is just kind of an option.
Yeah,
it's just kind of something we do on our off weekends.
Right. I think people think kids are stupid, and they're really not. They can do stupid things like we all did, but they're not dumb. I mean, and they can figure out, they know real quick what's important and what's not. And if everything has to line up like a miracle to go to church, they know it's not the important thing.
Yes.
They just, so teach them to love, and teach them by example, but it'll be a blessing to them. It'll be a blessing to you.
Right.
Make a difference in your family.
Indeed.
Right. So just really quickly before we go off of that, thank you both for sharing. So what are some, as we're thinking about getting plugged into the church and we're encouraging people to do so, what do you think are some lies or some kind of myths that prevent people from taking that next step to get plugged in?
Well, I mean, sometimes people are just like not going to come because like all churches are bad. I had a church hurt, so they're all going to. Well, first of all, I'm not saying you didn't have a bad church experience. Maybe somebody was mean to you in some church, but that's not every church.
Right.
It's like you can't go through life because one person did something expecting every person to do the same thing. I mean, that's you're going to miss out on a lot in life, and that's the case. If you dating in life and somebody wrongs you in that, and then like you just stay away and never have a relationship, well, that's a bummer. Like I don't, or never going to have a friendship because that guy lied to me or whatever. That's silly. We wouldn't do that in other areas of life. I don't know why we write off all the church and don't have the brain power to say, hey, maybe that's insulting to people, but like, hey, let me think of this. Yes, that was bad. It doesn't mean everything else is bad.
Right.
So I think a lot of times people start there, and it's a huge hindrance. Then, people fall off of the same things too. Well, the church is full of hypocrites. Well, join us. You're one more, because everybody's a hypocrite on some level. Doesn't matter whether you're Christian or not. I mean, that's kind of a silly argument. Yes, the church is not perfect. We know that. The Bible's full of that. Paul's writing all the time trying to correct problems in the church. It's not perfect. People aren't perfect, but the overarching good, you shouldn't let that be an excuse. Oh gosh, people talk about the time. Well, all they talk about down there is money. All they do is ask for my money. I'm like, well, listen, buddy, you're not giving any anyway. So what are you worried about? Why are you mad about that? First of all, that's dumb. Because that's never true. I don't know any church that's like constantly talking about it like all the time.
Right.
Yeah, but that's I think people a lot of excuses to excuse poor behavior or whatnot. But I hate to see people, miss out on what God calls us to do. And for me, it boils down to that. It's like God calls us to be a part of His church. Mm-hmm. We're being disobedient if we're not. Mm-hmm. And you need to get involved in church. You need to be a part of it because we do follow Jesus together. I mean, it's really important. And as I said yesterday, like, don't make it an excuse because, like, this is a real deal. I can think of somebody who will remain nameless in this community that used to come to our church that constantly badmouths the church about the bad church experience she had, quote, here. And, like, the bad church experiences, we taught on sexual ethics. What the Bible says and how if you go in either direction, the Bible defines that as sin. There's one standard. That wasn't attacking anybody. Here's the Bible. Well, that was the bad church experience. That so she left and terrible and loves to pontificate about that. But it's like, look, that's the word of God. You need to be in a church where that happens.
Right.
So she pulled and went to the one that won't talk about that kind of stuff. Because that's safe church. And it's like, that's not a bad church experience. Nobody attacked you. Nobody called you a name. Nobody said you didn't matter to God. It was just like that was the topic that day. But apparently she did that. So a lot of people use a lot of excuses to get around that. But I just hate people bashing the church unnecessarily. And you get all these these kind of stories. I don't even know if that answered your question, but that's me.
I think
talking about
you
a little
get
bit
into
about
it
some of the stuff.
as far as priorities. You've talked about it before, but priorities and the perspective of it is that you can prioritize ball or other things, whatever the other things are, and miss out on church and that consistency. And if you've got a formula that's going to help your family or help your marriage or help you individually, and you believe that church can be a family, then why would you not try?
Yeah.
And you get into the and like I said, I hate the church hurt word, because that's just the devil providing another excuse.
Yeah, he doesn't want you here. That is for sure. He doesn't want you here. But I agree with Kevin. I mean, so many times it's going to boil down to things, because like commitment, and the reality is, everybody's got the same amount of time every day. Now, we decide what we do with that time. Right. We decide where we're going to invest it, what we're going to do with it. But it's going to come down to, is this important? As a Christian, it should be important because Jesus died for it. He established it. He's got promises for it. He's given us a gift to be used in it. I mean, all these things. I mean, it just builds up. And so if as a follower of Jesus, we need to be plugged into the church. And look, somebody's listening to this, and I'm not sure about Waterlife. Okay, great. Well, there's other great churches. There's all kinds of great churches that honor Jesus, love Jesus, and teach His word here in our county. There's something to fit you, but don't let that keep you out of church, and get involved and take that step. And I know sometimes people, like I said, by their personality might be a little bit more reticent because they're a little more introverted. But no, look, take the step. You'll find good people here. You'll get in community. I mean, I was talking to Joshua about that the other day. I was meeting some of the new 20-somethings that are here for the 20-something ministry, and it's kind of fun talking to them as young folks. And I'm like, oh, cool, it's good. They're going out doing things. They're studying the Bible together. It's good to see. And a lot of them, are coming from other churches because their churches don't have anything, going on for 20-something-year-olds, and they're welcome here, obviously, to do that. But they're getting that little spirit of community. But somebody took a step to show up, and that's a good thing. And we can put everything in front of people to help people take a step, but we can't make you do it. And that's just so simple too. Just come to a serving event, get on a serving team, get in a life group, come to one of these classes. Everybody hangs around afterwards, talks, and you'll get to know some people. Then when you come to church next time, hey, Johnny, hey, Sarah, you begin to know people, begin to develop community. So just excuses, everybody's got an excuse. Get over the excuses, make a commitment. It just should boil down to that and get here.
Yeah.
And that's not being legalistic. That's that's life-giving.
Right.
It makes a difference.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Good stuff. All right. So in the scripture reading that we had today, kind of a few things that were going on. You kind of mentioned it earlier, but the church was growing. So like you said, they were developed to worship, fellowship, prayer, all of those things. And so we saw that the combination of those things, that was building the church. So obviously we talked about how those things will still continue to build the church today. It's not rocket science. So what are some things? So we know that those are things that will help build a church and get them plugged in. That's what we just talked about. But what are some things that hinders growth at a church today, of a church today?
All right, let's roll. Here we go.
Yeah, get fired up.
So first of all, legalism will kill a church. There's no growth in legalism. Legalism, it's Jesus and something else. It's always that kind of stuff. Well, you can't have but this version of the Bible, and you devil ladies can't wear pants, and you got to have what legalism. Legalism will kill a church.
Right.
Self-righteous, judgmental attitude will kill the church. Also, people that have a me monster, just insider focus. If you're all about casseroles instead of souls, and I talked about that. People mad about my casserole comments, and cats and roosters. But anyway, but if you have that insider focus where all you want to do is do your holy huddle and all that stuff, there's just not going to be anything growing there. Another thing. There's conflict in a church, and there's just mean-spirited people, growing up drama and all that stuff. People got enough drama in their life.
Amen.
They are not, even if they like the pastor, if he's preaching, they are not going to hang out there because they got enough drama in their life. They'll go to the church that doesn't have drama. So, I mean, that's just right off the tip of the, that's just the tip of the iceberg right there. But those kind of things, you get a insider-focused mindset. Maybe you got some legalism over here. You don't ever get outside the walls. You're not a church that's welcoming. You haven't taught the church hey, the mission is our community. You're not opening the doors to welcome people. You're not coaching them on that. Then it just becomes this holy huddle, and it's just going to kill growth. And we'll study that book till we're blue in the face, but we won't do anything with it.
Right.
But there's a lot of things that will kill growth. But that's some of it.
Yeah.
We'll
what
do
have
it.
you seen, Kevin?
I mean, I think. Well, he alluded to, but consumer Christianity. What can I get out of this? What can this do for me? I mean, that will destroy a church.
Right.
The lack of unity, the selfish agenda. I think we should go this way. I think we should go that way. That kills the church. That kills momentum. Divisiveness within the church, siloed individuals within the church. I mean, again, just several different things. And, you alluded to it, but what kills the church, and when people think I'm in control. No, it's God's church. It's not my church. It's not your church. It's God's church. And when people try to take control over what's biblically Christ should lead the church, that kills the church.
Yeah.
Right.
And they've got nobody to blame but themselves.
Yeah,
Right.
and if you don't have strong leadership in a church, that's a problem. That'll kill growth. If you have this kind of free for all, and the pastor's over there, and the leadership's not really doing anything, you got to have strong leadership on that. To get people where they're going. That's a big thing that will kill growth, as well. People that aren't held accountable to the Bible. That'll be a thing. People that in the church that won't deal with conflict. One of the key things I saw was a philosophy where people are like, we want to make everybody happy and try to pacify everybody. It's like the peace at all costs. That's not peace at all.
Right.
Like sometimes you got to confront people, and sometimes people got to go. Like
Right.
that actually has to happen in church. Sometimes the biblical discipline thing.
Matthew 18.
When you have just the divisive persons, so a failure to address that kind of stuff, a failure to say, well, let's just have let's just make peace. You're not making peace. You're creating problems. You're getting the church off mission. So leadership's a big piece on that as well. Like I said, that self-focus. A lot of things get a church off mission, and you got to guard against that. Like I am reminded about that all the time. I love what God's doing at Waterlife, I always have, but I'm constantly almost, just looking, where is it, looking out for these things to make sure we not drift in that. And that's why, you hear things about, I'm like watching people put, complaint things in the offering plate. I'm calling that out. Don't you dare, do that sacrilegious nonsense. That's not what we do here. That's not how we operate as Christians here.
Yep.
I think leadership's got to be willing to call that kind of stuff out. You got to keep people on mission. Like, hey, no, not over here. This is our mission, making disciples, doing the things God calls us to do. So good leadership, lack of leadership would be a problem.
Right. Yeah. So talking about leadership, and this was just kind of a little side note, but just in case anybody's listening today, how does our leadership work here at Waterlife Church? So obviously you're the lead pastor and things like that, but who are you kind of accountable to other than Jesus Christ? But
well, first of all, and that's the thing that people don't understand. That's the most sobering thing in the world, is to be accountable to Jesus. Yeah. I'm not the greatest fan. I don't put that verse on the refrigerator that talks about those of us who teach will be will be held more accountable, like judged more strictly. That's a sobering thing, and so you've got. So you're right. I don't want to. I'm not trying to overspend, but I'm saying you need to understand. For those of us in leadership, we answer to Jesus and are accountable to Jesus. So that's the guiding principle of principles.
Yes.
But in our church, I'm accountable to a leadership team. We've got our leadership. Some churches call that elders. If you look at the New Testament model, so they could hire and fire me today. They're the kind of the guardians of our church. They kind of keep us on mission, make sure they make the big decisions, make sure we're going in the right direction biblically. They are the kind of guys that if I were to do something sideways, not biblical, they would deal with me. And I need that accountability. And so then, the staff is accountable to me. You remember that, right?
I got it.
You and Kevin get that. You got it. Check. Got it. No. And that's how it works. And it flows. We've got a financial team that deals with the finances, but they're accountable to the leadership team as well. But that's how it kind of works in our church. So yeah. Just a little side note.
It's a little behind the scenes.
Yeah, and we've had that forever. That was one thing I knew early on. It is dangerous to be in a place as a leader where you don't have any accountability. Right. And so we have accountability that way. It's always been accountability.
I love it. Yep.
Yeah.
I love our
think,
system. Yep.
With being in other churches and knowing the structure here, is the clean structure of it, and it's not putting people in leadership to fill a spot.
Yeah.
It's not bodies. It's for a purpose and a biblical purpose.
Well, and the Bible tells us it's the same thing. It's like you're supposed to there's a qualification list of people in those leadership positions biblically, and it's like you just don't get warm bodies and put them in, or because somebody wants to be on the committee.
Small town politics,
we just don't do that.
like that.
Right.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
you need godly people in there, godly leadership, and then that goes once again goes back to keeping us on mission and not killing.
It makes a difference as well when you see God's hand on a church. You can track it back to leadership.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. I'm thankful for it. All right. Well, viewers, this is the part where Todd is going to nerd out. Okay, you guys are about to get a different side, a different type of teacher.
Story time.
But it all connects. That's what's funny. So anyway, right now we are going to kind of dive into the connections. So you talked about I think he was a general this morning. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh yeah, he's a pastor.
Okay, a pastor. All right,
but he led the regiment.
Okay. Led the regiment. See, I don't know nothing.
John Peter Mullenberg.
Okay. All right.
Had curls and a nice uniform.
Yeah, y'all are going to copy the hairstyle. I got that. I said noted. All right, so we're going to kind of talk about the connection connection between the history of the church and our country. We're coming up on the big 250th anniversary this summer. So just kind of
we are talking about this. I got all these ideas. I think I need to do it. I want to do a teaching on the Over Fountain Victory Men and then take everybody on a trip to Kings Mountain. It'll be a fun day outing. But anyway, but yes, like the role the church played, the role Christianity played in not just the revolution, but in the founding of the nation is gigantic. You can't read the documents without realizing every bit of that was preached by these pastors before the revolution. Like all these principles about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, so that we're given, all these, certain unalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, all that. That is a direct quote from a sermon. They preached all this stuff. These pastors were incredibly influential in preaching liberty, preaching, for freedom and all of that. And so these guys played a big role in that, but also then they played a big role in the revolution with the fighting. Now, if you ever saw the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson.
I think I was forced to watch it in school.
Forced to watch it. I told Becky we were going to watch it in church. She's like, you can't watch that. He hacks everybody up with a tomahawk. I'm like, I know it, but whatever. Anyway.
They probably fast forwarded through that.
I was like, it was a good movie.
Social studies,
well, that movie is like an amalgamation of like a couple different battles, a couple different characters, like Mel Gibson's character's based on Francis Marion, basically, who ran around South Carolina just bothering the British for a long time. Several of the battles are reflective of battles that happened in the South. But that scene where the pastor gets out and he picks his gun, that's from Muhlenberg. That thing I talked about today, when they do the scene when they're in the church and the guys stand up and go out. But these guys are like, fired up. Like I'm going to talk about, spoiler alert for those who are listening, I'm going to talk about another guy next week, James Caldwell, and he was a pastor. He had his church burned by the British, his house burned by the British, and his wife was sitting on the bed with their children. The British shot and killed her.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, and so this guy raises a militia, and he's going to fight, and he's got this great thing. I'm going to use this Sunday. Come on, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. It's great. I get excited. He walks into the platform to preach. They say one time, and he puts his Bible down, and he takes one pistol out, and he lays it down. He takes another pistol and lays it out. 2 pistols.
There you go.
You packing your pistols?
Yeah,
you got
there
your
you
pistols?
go.
Anyway, 2 pistols, and then he says the first thing out of his mouth. He says, "The British will not prevent me from preaching, but they're welcome to try."
Get fired up.
Get fired up is right. These guys were not messing around.
Yeah.
I mean, this was not like there were no woke, effeminate pastors in that day. These guys are fired up. Now, what's interesting, getting about that Muhlenberg guy who recruits the militia and he goes off to fight. He's got another brother that's a pastor. And his brother vehemently disagrees with him. Like, we shouldn't do this. You're getting into stuff you shouldn't. You just should pastor. What are you doing raising a militia, all this? Well, anyway, it comes full circle. Then they burn his church at the end of the year. And he said, he realizes he should have been in the fight.
Wow.
And then he comes on the fight. But the story, like the history is full of pastors and churches that, militias were, these militias were made up that went off and fought the British. And so it's a really neat thing to see all that. And I love that stuff. Y'all were at the pregnancy center banquet the other night, and I was talking about the Over Mountain Victory Men. I hope they enjoyed that. I don't know if they did.
You did at least. So.
Well, I enjoyed it. But the pastor that sent those guys off to fight, that Samuel Dokes, is another one that would walk. They said he walked in. He's a Scotch-Irish Presbyterian pastor that led mountain men on the frontier, rough men. He's a rough man. And he literally would bring his rifle with his Bible when he preached, loaded, laid it up the pulpit because he had to stop because they had to go fight the Cherokee during the service. We just got crying babies, but they didn't fight. And they had to go out and they'd shoot and then they'd come back. And he'd come back and get back to the service back or whatever. I mean, this is a different class of people. Wow, and this is why I'm telling you, this is why we have the United States of America, because of these tough people.
That's why I was going to ask, why was it important for them to do that then, and why is it important for us to do that now?
Well, yes. So they didn't have this thing. They understood, like Muhlenberg said to his church, he said, our ancestors, he's talking about the previous generation that came to America. He said they came for freedom. If we don't get involved, we're going to lose every freedom. They understood. They understood that you got to stand up and fight for things. They just understood. And they were like, this idea that the church should never do anything about politics, the church should never play a role in that is completely foreign to these guys. They're all about it because they understood, what do you mean? We have to engage in this. We have to speak up or our rights, our freedom is going to be taken away. That is an incredible lie that's perpetuated across American people. And even people in the church pick up on it. Like, for instance, people will say, separation of church and state. Okay, when people say that, the way they use that in America, they don't even know what they're talking about.
Right.
What that means is Christians were concerned in that day that, like in England, they would establish a state church. This is about keeping the government out of the church house, not churches and Christians playing a role in politics or influencing politics or standing up for biblical values. That's completely wrong, the way people do it. And if you'll read for yourself, read the letters, James Madison, all these guys talk about this, the letters to the Danbury Baptist Convention. Did you have to study that? Maybe not. Anyway, yeah, that's something in Baptist history.
I was like, wait a minute, no.
But anyway, it's all about that. That's nonsense. The same thing, like you cannot open the Bible without politics in the Bible. We've got good leaders and we've got bad leaders. And we got God's people stuck in the middle.
Correct.
And God's people are blessed when they're good leaders, and they reap the penalty when they're bad leaders. And so, like, even some of our heroes, David's a political leader. Joshua becomes a political leader. I mean, like, all these people, ended up playing roles in that. Nehemiah, we talked about him rebuilding the wall. He's a political leader. So it's kind of silly that, like, there's somehow it's like, well, we never should get involved with what's going on in our government, going on in our world. That's nuts. That's nuts. Why would we not? And here's what I was talking to the people about this the other day. Like, let me tell you why politics matter. Now, we're not sitting here telling you who to vote for, but I will tell you this. You need to vote your faith and you need to vote that book.
Right.
You need to make sure, like, what lines up best with the values of the Bible. Now, you're not going to find a perfect match anywhere, but, like, what lines up best, right? And so we should do that, because think about it. Politics, what are we doing? We're electing politicians. Okay, well, what do politicians do? Politicians pass policies. And policies impact people. And bad politicians, bad policies impact people in a bad way.
Right.
Yeah.
And the opposite is also true. Yep. So you have to be involved in that. And the early church, these guys know this. They know that, like, freedom, they understand freedom. You got to fight for it. Remember, so many of them, the people that came over for religious freedom in the beginning. And so they're looking at this, and here's the British, they're trying to disarm them. They're paying them taxes without representation. They're quartering people in their houses. I mean, who would like that? I don't want to put people up in my house, and the government's telling me I have to do it. And so they're pushing back on that. But they realized this was something that you had to fight for. And these guys, thank goodness they did that and didn't fall for that nonsense about, well, the church shouldn't say anything. Church shouldn't play a role. Listen, I'm telling you, if you will go back, and they have not recordings, but they have the written record of these sermons these guys preached. And the founders write about the influence of some of these pastors, because they talk about how there's not anything that wasn't advocated for in the Declaration of Independence and their Constitution and all that wasn't already being preached. The principles of liberty were already being preached in the pulpits across the continental, where the colonies were in the United States. And so that's what people don't understand. And there's things like, I mean, you could look even in their charters to be a governor of most of the colonies, you had to swear an allegiance that you were a follower of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
And you got to hear now at Family Leads, you got to hear David Barton.
Yeah,
David Barton's tremendous on this, walking you through the original documents, reading and seeing. Go to Washington, D.C. There's Bible verses everywhere, on every monument, everything else, because that is in there. These are not a bunch of guys that did not believe in Jesus, but these founders, had strong faith in that. So the church's got to get involved in that. It's interesting. Like, it's not right versus left anymore. We're past, like, small government versus big government. It's right and wrong now. Yep. I mean, when you have people advocating, come on, I'm not, if this offends you, good on you, whatever. You got people advocating to tear babies from the womb to the 9th month.
Correct.
I think it's wrong at any point.
Yeah.
But, like, I mean, that is not a political issue. That is a moral, 100% a right and wrong moral issue.
And people say, oh, that doesn't happen. I'm like, literally go to liveaction.org right now, and you
It
will
does
see
happen.
it. And they share it
Of
on
course it
Instagram.
does.
They're like, I'm going to show y'all what happens,
does.
because
Of course
it does
it does.
happen.
And
multiple times daily.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like, why on earth would the church be silent on that?
Right.
I think I said that the other week. That's pastoral malpractice for a church not to speak into those kind of things when the Bible's got an answer for that. For all these things that we are so confused about in the world.
Yeah.
But see, they didn't have that problem in the 1700s. I mean, these guys, these are hardy guys. These guys love the Lord. They love their people, but they know you got to fight for these things. And so, there's more of that coming. I've been doing a deep dive reading lately on some of that. I've been reading a book called This Fierce People, which is all about the Southern people. I like that. The fierce. See, Women of Fury. We got the fierce people.
There you go.
We got it all. But like just these Scotch-Irish Huguenot people that settled the American South, that kept the battle going on, kept stirring up the British when it was not going well everywhere else. And there's a good case if the Southern people didn't keep it going, it might have ended a different way, but they just kept being difficult and kept fighting. And right at the center of that are churches, and pastors that are leading the way. So it's really a really cool thing. That's part of history people don't understand. But
Yeah.
like Lexington Concord First Battle, these Christians
Yeah.
fighting that thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, it's kind of like a loaded question, but it's just kind of like, how do you think that, like, in a nutshell, we have gotten so far from, like you talked about, the people in the 1700s, they just had such a clear understanding of what needed to be done and what they had to do, and they took personal responsibility for that. And then you flash forward to 2026. Sometimes I think to myself, oh my gosh, what would those people think if they were stepping into our world today, and just how things have changed so much. So,
But let me interrupt you there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I saw a meme a while back that said, if the Apostle Paul was here today, the
my
church
gosh.
would be getting another letter.
Yeah,
Have you
we'd
seen
be
that
getting
one?
a
Like he'd be
letter.
writing a letter.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing. If the founders and some of those guys were here,
Right.
they would already be like, what are you doing? Why aren't you pushing back? Like already. I mean, they would already be like, it was a 1.5% tax on tea that got them stirred up.
Yeah.
We're about 30s. I mean, and just the overreach of government for me, I can't stand it. I believe in freedom because I don't want people infringing on what we do here.
Correct.
Right.
And there are people, like, people think you're overreacting when you say this. There are people right now, just like in Europe, that want to make it illegal to teach that. They would love to shut you down. They would love to take the tax exempt status, do all that stuff, not for their groups, but for the church. They would love to get you to shut up. They just arrested a guy. I saw this the other day. I think this is in England. They just arrested a guy who was challenging a Muslim as a street preacher, calling him to be saved.
Yeah.
And they called it a hate crime and arrested the guy. That's what's happened in some of these Western nations, and
Yeah.
that can happen here too. So your freedom stuff, it can be taken away real quick. You're always one election away
Yeah.
from
Correct.
losing
That's
that
what I
stuff.
said. I'm like,
In my
I don't
mind,
think
in my
people
mind.
realize. I'm like, if we lose this, we keep going in this direction. I mean, I was watching Bryce Crawford, and he said, I literally just saw this before I came in here, but he said there was a lady who had lived in Africa her whole life and things like that, and she had gotten here somehow, and maybe she was working to come here, but the thing that he was highlighting is that Americans have just been lullabied to sleep in this entertainment and in this me culture and stuff like that. She said, back home in Africa and things like that, where she would, worship and stuff like that. It was just like the presence of God was so rich because they don't have all the distractions that we have and different things like that. And just like you were talking about this morning, whenever it comes to the life of the church, like we think that we've found some new, like you were talking about progressivism and different things like that. And so we think that we're so enlightened and that those people back then didn't know anything. And so it's just, there's a lack of knowledge, like everything that you're telling me right now. It's like they don't teach this stuff in school anymore. They don't teach it as plainly. Like I said, whenever I was listening to David Barton, we took the students to DC, and if I hadn't been a chaperone there, I wouldn't have heard it. But just listening to him, I was like, oh my goodness, they do not teach this in schools because it's something that would be considered offensive, or we don't want to talk about war. We don't want to talk about people uprising or anything like that against the government. And so I just think that it's a lack of knowledge, and then it's just, I don't know.
Well, and it's
a
also
scary place
part
to
of,
be in.
you need to understand that is part of the Marxist leftist playbook is to demonize your history as somehow so terrible, bad, and that it's so bad, America's so bad, you got to tear it down and start over. So America's always the bad guy. Look, it's stolen land, blah, 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 all this stuff. Actually, Plymouth Colony, Jamestown Colony paid for their land from the Indians. Go look it up. Yeah, but that's the narrative that's always turned, and and America's inherently racist, broken, this, that, and the other. And so let's demonize our culture, demonize the history, tear it down. So a new start is the better way. That's progressivism, right? Like we had it all wrong. Now we're going to correct it. We're going to move in a different direction. You got to watch that. There's an intent with that, and they've been very successful with that.
And
when meanwhile,
segue into that kind
well,
of
when meanwhile, if you will read in
read
the Bible, if you will read in the history, read the documents. That's always the funnest thing I enjoyed about history was reading the original documents and stuff and reading the stuff. And you see these people, man, these people are talking about Jesus all the time. These people knew the value of freedom. They are not, it's not what they portray a lot of times. And read it for yourself. That's always challenged people. It's just like the Bible. Read it for yourself. Read it. Don't listen to what somebody's saying about it. Go read it for yourself. You don't believe what I'm saying about the Black Robe Regiment guys and these pastors and their influence, go read their sermons. Go read what people like Jefferson, go read what the founders say about these pastors who played such a huge influence.
People don't want to put that effort.
Well, I know they don't. I know, but what I'm saying is if you'd
Yeah.
educate yourself, you'll find.
I know
find
it's
that's
just
the case.
a 60-second sound bit, a 90-second sound bit is much easier to
But I'm
believe
telling you,
and
man,
not have
these-
to challenge.
These men are men.
Yeah.
And these women are signing up their men. That's the best part of that story.
Fired up.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they said like 168 ones with something signed up that day, and then had 300 next day. So apparently the women signed their men up.
I think it's gone far away from the standard of the Bible.
Right.
I mean, and you can hear that from where it was founded from, and we've just strayed away, and people continue to resource bad options and that are contrary to the Word.
Well, it always goes
when
back.
it comes to politics. I mean, it goes against the Word. It should be black and white.
Yeah. Well, it always goes back to this book, and so you should not be the middle of the road kind of person in church, and like no. Let's talk about this. That's like you well know I got called out about being obsessed over the transgender thing, which is kind of funny. Obsessed. I'm like, I think I preached one, like I give one illustration, whatever. Okay, that's not the definition of obsessed to me.
Exactly.
However, I'm like, why would I not talk about that when 95% of the headlines you hear are people being indoctrinated by that and swayed by that and people being harmed by that? The Bible's got an answer for that. That is the enemy attacking once again what God set up. And this is what, so bad about the progressive church. I think that's where you're going with your question. Like the progressive pastors and churches are embracing all the things that are attacks of Satan. So understand this. In Genesis, we looked at this way long ago in Origins, when God creates the world and he sets up everything. First of all, he creates them male and female. Then he puts them in a marriage relationship, and sex was for that relationship between a man and a woman, period. So all this stuff is getting set up there in the beginning. Now, interestingly enough, when does Satan show up? He does not show up in the Bible until the first family unit is created. We've got the first marriage, and then he shows up, and he starts wrecking and wreaking havoc. But look at every attack today. Every attack today that we hear in the headlines is an attack on what God designed. It's an attack on, so when you attack male and female, that's an attack on God's design. No, there is male, there is female. Anybody who's got common sense knows that. Anybody that understands basic biology, anybody who's ever been on a farm or see two dogs at a certain time, like understand this. Not hard to figure out.
Right.
But yet in our world we're confused. That's an attack on what God set up. Same thing. We come over here. No, marriage can be between two men. Marriage can be between two women, or it can be between three, or whatever combination you come. No, marriage biblically is defined as between a man and a woman. One man, one woman. That's the biblical definition of marriage. But what do we have? The enemy attacks that. So then we open that. So that's the next thing people are saying. It's probably polygamy is the next thing they're going to license for here in America. They're going to be people working for that.
Awful.
Then when you come to sex and sexuality, you have one standard for sex and sexuality. It is a man and woman in the marriage context, and it's blessed and awesome and to be enjoyed. God designed it for that. But you take it out of that context, either way you go, homosexual or heterosexual, that's defined as sin. But what is we come along and we normalize all this. See, this is all of that is attack the enemy. Now, and the Bible speaks to every bit of that. And the pastor's job, the church's job, is to educate the people, to teach them the Word of God so they know how to build their life on that foundation. So I would want our people to be able to say, hey, look, I know politicians, we don't put our hope in politicians. You're dumb if you do.
Right.
I mean, come on, it's politics. We don't put our God, Jesus is our God. We follow Jesus, but I believe he wants us to be politically active. I believe he wants us to vote. I mean, why would we not vote? Why would we not have a say in what's going on in America?
Right.
And we should do our best to educate our people. Here's the biblical truths, and here's how it lines up with the moral issues of the day. And yep, party one may be over here, party two may be over here on their stance on that. Maybe there's a third party over here. Maybe this candidate, that's immaterial. You need to evaluate it based on a biblical foundation and do your best to vote for the party or the group or whoever's running that's going to line up as best possible with biblical view, or going to do the least damage to it. Yeah. Because because like in the Bible, there's all kinds of different leaders. There's three kind of leaders in the Bible. You got Jezebel. Bad. Yep. You got an evil, terrible leader doing all kinds of lead God's people astray. There are leaders like that in the world today. Then you've got on the other end of the spectrum, you got a Josiah type who's a good and godly leader that goes and tears down all the high places and all the temples and all the idol worship and all that kind of stuff, who's abused by God. And then sometimes you got a Jehu. Now a Jehu, you drive fast, you appreciate Jehu.
What?
Yeah, what? Well, Jehu, there's a line in the Bible where Jehu's coming and they're like, look, it's Jehu. He's driving like a madman. He's driving so if you're a road rager, this is your life verse. But he's driving his chariot and he's like, here he comes. He's driving like a madman. Well, Jehu,
Jehu's
this kind of leader where he's He's good on one hand. He's kind of a little bad on the other hand. He's just kind of like, but there's all those kind of leaders in the Bible, and God can work through that. But we need to do our best to figure out, like, we're not always going to have a Josiah, perhaps. We certainly don't want a Jezebel, and there's some of those out there. But sometimes you get the guy in the middle. I don't know, but you got to look and evaluate it, but base your voting and speak up based on biblical values. Right. I mean, the moment the school system begins to do something that's ungodly, we need to speak up. I mean, I don't know why we're afraid to do all this stuff, and that's not playing politics. That's being salt and light in the world the way Jesus wanted us to be. What kind of community do we want? What kind of country do we want? It's like if you stick your head in the sand, they're going to change it, and they're going to take it in a direction you don't want it to go. Yep. I used to think I'd read these passages in the book of Acts and about the church being persecuted, and I think, man, I'm glad we live in America. We'll never have that. I really believe that before the end of my ministry is over, preaching's going to get you in trouble.
Correct.
It can get you, because I'm watching what's happening in Western Europe, and America's always just a little bit behind Western Europe, and they're starting to turn up like, they're obsessed with Muslims now over there, and they pacify them, but they demonize the church. And like I said, arresting a guy for trying to convert somebody to Christianity from a Muslim faith, called it a hate crime. They have locked up Christians for what they've said in Western countries, not third world communist country, Western countries. If you don't think there are people that would not want to pass legislation like that here, you're crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people that are anti-God, anti-church that would love to legislate that way. So you got to be on point.
They wouldn't fight so hard against it if it weren't true.
Boom.
I think it circles back to, it brings it all in full circle, it circles back to knowing what you believe. Going back to the Word of God. And
biblical foundation.
That's part of even my story, is finding a church that actually doesn't skirt around the truth, preaches the truth, and actually can take you a little bit further into it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it goes back to, yes, discipleship and knowing what the Word says and being grounded in it when you hear it from the schoolhouse, when you hear it from a politician, even when you hear it from any venue, is that, okay, is that biblically accurate?
Right.
What should I say? Should I stand up? And it's not, hey, let's call the pastor.
Yeah.
Well, the pastor doesn't always need to call. You need to learn what you need to know and stand up for it. Truth.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's a responsibility of the church to, teach people, and, people should live accordingly on that. And that's why, going back to the politics thing, it's funny. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody today that, here's the part where I'm just like, look, do not take this verse and twist it to turn it into a proof text for socialism. Right. That's not what that is. Yep. And you would say, well, why would you even bring that up? Because socialism, communism, which is Marxism, always ends up with the persecution of the church. They always go after the church. Every time, every communist nation, China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Eastern Europe, where all that's happened, where communists come over, the first thing they do is they go after the church, and they shadow the church. It's an anti-God way of thinking. So of course, if we see that people turning those wheels and try to make a proof case and moving that way in our country, that's a bad thing for America. That's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
And so why would you not talk about that? Yeah. See, I don't look at that as being even politics. And we're not, politics is politics, but there are moral issues and things that inform politics. And remember, politics, it leads to policies. Policies impact people, good or bad. So as Christians, being salt and light, we know this is the best way to live. This is the truth of the Word of God. We would want to try to, have things that go along with that. I was reading one of Barton's books the other day. You were talking about David Barton, and he's got a great 2-volume set on the revolution and whatnot. And he's talking about in there, they talk about how much, they looked at the 10 Commandments and all these truths, and like there's all these amazing quotes from all the founders about how this is the foundation for life and liberty. They talk about you can't have a free society without Christians. If you don't have a moral foundation, a biblical foundation, you just can't have a foundation. And I think that's some of the problem we're having now. They don't have a moral foundation. So church has got to quit being silent. People got to get over this, quote, politics thing. I mean, like, look, we know our hope is in Jesus Christ. And we got politicians on all sides of all shades, and not every party is good. And what, but you've got to figure out how to like what are your values? What is biblically? What does the Bible teach you to do? Like, listen, I will never vote for a candidate that wants to kill babies.
Correct.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
Ever.
Agreed.
If the Republican Party switched today and started doing that, I'm like, I got to find something else. I got to find some other candidate. I can't. I will not do that. I will not do that.
And trust me, people speak up against it whenever we've been seeing things, and they've gotten a little bit soft on some things every time. And that's the thing. Even if, because that was what we were talking about even during the election, it was like, even if you don't look at the 4-person that's in the front, but think about who's in their cabinet and the people who are back behind them fighting for these policies and fighting. So we're kind of, we have these organizations and things like that, thank God, that are kind of in, and they're seeing the different policies that are coming out, and they're like reading the fine print, and they're like, oh, they're getting a little soft on it here. We got to speak up. And then that's whenever they'll kind of walk back on it, because we do have to remember like we can speak up. You know what I mean? I think there are some people who just don't even, we're just kind of like, well, that's just the government. Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, it's the government. So what can I do to make a difference? What can I, there's people who think that, like you're talking about, people who truly believe that socialism, communism, things like that would be a good thing. But I also think that there are people who think that it just could never happen to us because we take our freedoms, we take our freedom so much for granted. And I think until you go, like you were talking about, to a third world country or something like that, you don't see truly how free we are. And so I think we just take it for granted. We never think that it'll come here, but it has come here. We see it in places like New York. We see it all over the place. These things, exactly.
Well, understand, and we'll
land
the plane with this. But like, if good folks that love Jesus and church do not get involved and do not speak up for biblical truth and biblical values and the freedoms that we hold dear as Americans, that these founders who held these same values put this country together, the same things the Black Robe Regiment pastors preached about and influenced these guys to put that in those documents. The America that we grew up with is going to be very different from our children. They're going to have a very different definition of America. And that frightens me personally with the grandchildren coming up. And some, because I watch some of these crazy people. They need the Lord, 100%.
Absolutely.
But you're watching them, and it's like, man, that is communism, and that has led everywhere it's been tried. It's led to the deaths of millions of people.
Yeah.
And yet we got people that think that's a great idea, and people that want to shut up the Bible and shut people like myself from speaking and stuff. Like, we can't do that. Like, America has functioned real well for a long time for some good reasons, and it's what the founders put down. But like, we're in a place now where we're in a real weird trajectory, and if you're watching, it's very alarming. But like, if Christians keep sitting on their hands doing nothing, saying, well, I hate politics, well, I don't particularly like it, but you got to vote.
Correct.
You need to vote, and you need to vote based on as close as you can biblical values. Now remember, no one's going to line up perfectly with this. That if you're looking for that mythical character, you're not going to find that.
Right.
But you find the one that's the best, that's going to be the least harm to Christianity, America, or whatever else, or supports at least some biblical value, and you vote accordingly. So there you go.
Yep, absolutely. Well,
get fired up. More Black Robe Regiment coming up.
I know, we're excited.
Man, I'm telling you right now, that era of history, everybody should read it. It's good. Mm-hmm. Good book, This Fierce People. Read it. It's about the Southern people.
What was it?
This Fierce People.
Okay. Get fired up.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you got your homework for next time. So that is all from us this week. Again, we always want to say that if you ever have any questions about the Sunday morning sermon, or if you have any questions from anything that we discussed today, please send your questions to podcast@waterlifechurch.com. We check that every single day. So if there's something you want us to dive a little bit deeper on, or you need clarification on, or something that you've just thought of brand new, please feel free to email us there. And then hopefully on next week's episode, we'll be able to answer your questions and address those things, and just continuing growing and learning and becoming good disciples of Jesus Christ. That's what we're here to do. So get fired up. We'll see y'all next week.
All right.